From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. First in and first out. We begin with that particularly familiar phrase for anyone who has family in the Persian Gulf. The Pentagon said today the first troops will be coming home on Thursday. And the 82nd Airborne Division was the first to go, only 7 days after the Iraqis invaded Kuwait in August. In Iraq today, 15 other Americans got the word that they will be on their way home just as soon as the weather makes it possible to fly. They were prisoners of war. 15 Americans among 35 Allied prisoners handed over to the International Committee of the Red Cross by the Iraqis. The Iraqis say there are no others. Saddam Hussein was on television again tonight, though not a very good picture, to say that the government is going to increase the sugar and baby milk rations. Popular gestures after a war that has cut so deep and when Saddam Hussein as leader is so under siege. Here's ABC's John McCarthy.
Those who escaped Iraq today were still describing fighting in the streets, a revolution underway to get rid of Saddam Hussein.
The revolution is going there.
Is it now?
Yeah.
The revolution?
Yeah.
Is there a lot of fighting?
Yeah, a lot of fighting.
Saddam Hussein?
But as the U.S. government assessed satellite photographs and communications intercepts from southern Iraq, a starkly different picture was emerging. While there has been violent anti-government unrest in at least 9 Iraqi cities, it now appears that Saddam Hussein is winning.
The Iraqi government has been employing Republican Guard, regular army, people's militia in efforts to suppress this activity, and may have restored government control in a few of the affected areas.
His Marine Harrier jet. Neighbors celebrated on the Berryman's front lawn when news of his release came from the Pentagon. A short time ago, I talked with Captain Berryman's mother, a teacher in the local school. During the time that he was an MIA, missing in action, what were you thinking? What were you doing? How were you filling those hours when you had to wonder?
We had many friends and many family members that spent many hours with us, and we had the hopes and the prayers of all of our friends and family through all of those hours to just uplift us.
We know what kind of military person he is, brave and resilient. What kind of person is he?
Craig is a very responsible person, a very determined person. He had a cause and he carried out that cause to the limits.
Saddam Hussein was under siege today from Shiite Muslim rebels in southern Iraq and Kurdish separatists in the north. The United States said it is staying out of the Iraqi power struggle. Jim Stewart has more from the Pentagon. Good evening, Jim.
Dan, Saddam Hussein's internal problems only got worse today, with fighting spreading to more than a dozen cities. And Saddam reacted by calling out what little he has left in the way of an army.
The Iraqi government has been employing the Republican Guard, the regular army, people's militia, and police units in efforts to suppress this activity, and may have restored government control in a few of the affected areas.
While fighting has cooled in some of the 6 cities reporting unrest yesterday, including the port city of Basra, new violence has broken out in 7 more areas. Baghdad is moving troops from the Turkish and Iranian border regions to protect Baghdad and fight against rebels in the south. Frightened refugees fleeing the area say units loyal to Saddam Hussein are better armed and equipped than the civilians and disgruntled veterans of the Gulf War opposing them.
They are armed with light arms, light weapons. They have captured some heavy equipment, but I believe they probably will be successful in putting this down because of the lack of organization and leadership.
But that could change if many of the estimated 100,000 plus Iraqi prisoners of war decide to turn on their government, which is already promising them amnesty in hopes of warding off an insurrection.
The myth of his invincibility has been shattered as all of those thousands of members of the Iraqi military who fled Kuwait now move north. They're going to carry with them the word of the disaster that has befallen Saddam Hussein's forces in Kuwait.
U.S. forces, which have assumed defensive positions just south of the troubled areas, are not threatened by or involved in the fighting.
There's no move on the U.S. forces side to let any weapons slip through or to play any role whatsoever.
Saddam Hussein has faced rebellion before and survived, but never anything on this scale. The thinking here is that he may never be this vulnerable again. Dan?
Thanks, Jim. 7 months ago, Kuwaiti people fled Iraqi troops in tanks overrunning their country. Now things have come full circle, and Iraqis are fleeing into Kuwait. Bob McEwen is in Kuwait City. Bob?
Dan, as violence continues to spread in Iraq, one of the few windows on what is happening there is a border crossing along the main highway that runs towards the city of Basra from Kuwait. They came out of the desert in a steady rain, a stream of people seeking home. Families fleeing the chaos in Iraq found it again near the border with Kuwait. This man brought a body to the border, saying his friend had been shot by Iraqi soldiers in Basra. All day there were reports of death at the hands of Iraqi troops. Hunger in cities where the best food still goes to the Republican Guard. Many Iraqis bring to this border only confusion and fear, the baggage of a country that may be on the brink of civil war.
All of the people, Saddam down, army, killed the people killed the army.
In the other direction, the long road into Iraq is lined with the skeletons of Saddam Hussein's last war and Iraqi soldiers on the way to what could be his next. A few miles into Iraq, a no man's land, guarded by U.S. soldiers. Beyond this point, there are no guarantees. 28 Western journalists drove past this outpost yesterday, heading towards Basra. They haven't been heard from since.
They told us, you are the only one to get out. Don't know why.
These two Austrian reporters were seized by Iraqi soldiers on that road today. Held for 4 hours, they were questioned by Republican guards, then released.
And they were sitting there very relaxed, not at all nervous. I mean, it was some, as he just said before, it was some kind of coffee atmosphere in Vienna. But this was one of the strangest things.
For others, there were no happy endings. All day, refugees from Iraq were refused entry.
They just giving up. Had nowhere to go, nothing to do. Ready to start all over again.
For those turned away, there was only the long road back in the rain. Among the missing journalists are 3 Americans, last seen about 25 miles south of the city of Basra. The U.S. military command says that they may be in real danger. Dan?
Thanks, Bob. Iran is now moving to take full advantage of the turmoil in Iraq. CBS News correspondent Bob Fall recently returned from Iran and has this report.
There are signs that the country which still denounces Uncle Sam as the Great Satan is now trying to fan the flames against Saddam Hussein. Tehran has given sanctuary and has apparently unleashed anew Bakir al-Hakim, an obscure cleric who wants to install a Khomeini-like regime in Baghdad. Iran is trying to trigger an Islamic fundamentalist upheaval in Iraq, former Iranian President Bani Sadr said today in Paris, and Iraqi opposition groups do not disagree.
I can foresee from the now that there will be an Islamic Republic of Iraq. The uprising, it is the first priority of it is to topple Saddam Hussein.
But toppling Saddam may be harder than toppling the Shah. There are far more Shiites, and they are far more fervent in Iran than in Iraq. Iraqi Shiites have scant influence in key institutions like the army and secret police. While the charismatic Khomeini spent much of his 14 years of exile in Iraq setting up a government, Hakim, who has no charisma, hasn't set up anything. Still, exile groups worry that once Saddam signs a ceasefire, he will have the green light to crush Hakim or any other political foe.
We would like a commitment from the United States that will stop Saddam Hussein from using chemical gas against the uprising that is now taking place.
Other dissidents worry that if the U.S. supports Shiite extremists, it could replace a bad regime in Baghdad with one that is worse. That a stalking horse from Iran is the wrong horse to back. They warn Washington, be wary.
It is a spontaneous uprising by the people, the whole people. It's not a matter of a Shiite uprising or a fundamentalist uprising.
Long an international outcast for his alleged sponsorship of terrorism, Assad now is credited with restraining terrorism against Western targets during the war. By committing 20,000 Syrian troops to the coalition, Assad assured Syria millions of petrodollars for development back home. And thousands more Syrian troops will be on the front lines of any pan-Arab security force just now being formed in the Gulf. Assad didn't team up with the Allies just to get back at his old enemy, Saddam Hussein. The top reason, analysts say, is the Soviet Union, in decline, could no longer be relied on for its generous economic and military aid.
Assad probably had no choice, and that this was his way of saving Syria, really, to line up with the rest of the international community. And as we see, those countries that didn't do that are devastated.
Now Syria is situated better than ever to regain the Golan Heights occupied by Israel in 1967. Removing this welcome to Israel sign Israeli soldiers erected at a checkpoint in no man's land would delight the Syrians. But is Syria ready to sign a separate peace agreement to get the Golan Heights? President Assad finally did embrace Egypt's President Mubarak, even though Egypt was a pariah in the Arab world for signing the Camp David peace accords.
Syria has been and will always be the key to any settlement. This has been admitted by friends and foes, as we say.
Tom, of course, the United States is hopeful that Syria will improve relations with Israel. But as one Western diplomat here put it, if you're counting on Syria to make peace with Israel one-on-one, then don't hold your breath.
Thank you, Ed Rabel. NBC's Martin Fletcher now in Tel Aviv. The question is, Martin, how far will Israel go in all of this?
Tom, it's an old Middle Eastern art, how to say yes while meaning no. Israel and Syria both talk about peace talks, but the question is, do they mean it? Israeli tank maneuvers on the disputed Golan Heights give some of the answer. One top Israeli leader told NBC News, the real enemy is Syria. We shouldn't be preparing for peace, but for war.
Wondering about the future of Saddam Hussein, John.
Tom? Someone asked General Schwarzkopf about Saddam Hussein, and the general said he is neither a strategist, nor is he a tactician, nor is he a general, nor is he a soldier. Other than that, said the general, he's a great military man. Beyond his military defeat, can Saddam Hussein salvage anything political out of this calamity? Could he come out of it as a brave Arab leader who stood up to the heathen colonials, as a defender of the true faith or a champion of the Palestinians? It certainly doesn't look that way this evening. If Saddam had been smarter, it might have. Gamal Abdel Nasser was Egypt's leader when it was beaten by a British, French, Israeli force in the Suez Crisis of 1956. Nasser came out of that a hero. Egypt lost again to Israel in the Six-Day War of 1967, but Nasser stayed popular. In 1973, Egypt lost again to Israel under Anwar al-Sadat, and Sadat emerged as a great Arab hero. Saddam Hussein knows all that. Every Arab does. He must have thought it might happen to him. But it hasn't happened, maybe because he misjudged the Arab world's reaction to his invasion of Kuwait. Whatever, he has been denied hero status so far. No demonstrations in Cairo, no mobs in Karachi, no offers of asylum.
His nation's heritage. So Ali, along with his brother Suleiman, appointed themselves the guardians of the animals left to fend for themselves when the Iraqis closed down the zoo. Each day, the brothers went about their unglamorous resistance work, changing the hippos' water, scrounging food for hungry tigers, and tending to a bear that had been beaten by an Iraqi soldier. Trying to protect the animals could be heartbreaking work.
There are occasional incidents of cruelty which we've seen in zoos all over the world, but not the wholesale slaughter and destruction.